What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Mark. It is season 10, episode 15. And this is a really, really cool one. As you know, this guitar-centric channel is mostly guitar guest-related songwriters. We got a great guitar player here today, regardless. But Mr. Dave Hillis is here, who everybody knows from the Seattle grunge scene. But you've done so much more past that, which I want to get into as well. I don't want to just gloss over everything. But Dave, dude, thank you so much for making some time with me.
Yeah, it's great being here. I'm looking forward to questions and nerding out on all things guitars and music and every studios and things like that. It's always
Heck yeah.
fun.
There's a black hole in this channel. There's not enough producers. So I've had Warren Heward on here, who he was a blast. Also a
Sure.
great guitar player too. Do you know that cat?
Yeah. I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guitarist. But there is a black hole that I need to fill with more people with sonic ears that make things beautiful for us to listen to, and you're one of those cats. So, first and foremost, I gotta give a big shout out to Lee Caruso for hooking us up and introducing us. What a great dude! So thank you, Lee, for
Yeah.
that. But I wanted to talk to you. I always ask everybody this, no matter what the instrumentation is: bass player, guitar player, drummer, producer. But Dave, what's your like earliest musical memory?
It goes, I'm one of those people that it just started like right from when I can remember, like 5 years old kind of thing, picking at a piano at the neighbor's, piano, just being fascinated by that. And my uh, older brother actually picked up on that. He's quite a bit older than me. I'm the youngest, quite a bit older, and said, "Man, he's really fascinated by music, and even like Christmas pictures, things like that." I had like toy guitars or pianos, and then right away, gravitated towards, whatever was on TV back then, whether anything from Donnie and Marie to Hee Haw to what anything music, that was playing on TV. And I was just always fascinated with it. And so yeah, it goes from there. And then by the time I was 10, we were moving from New York to the West Coast. And one of the big things was I was promised to get guitar lessons. That was my bartering. Like, I don't want to move, my friends, and it was like this thing. So yeah, it's just always been collecting 45s and watching, like I say, anything that had anything to Partridge Family, anything that had to do with, you know, bands or music or performing and things like that. Just so yeah, just kind of always been a thing.
Okay. Did they follow through on the guitar lessons?
They did. So fall through guitar. I took piano first, which to this day I wish I would have stuck more to and really become a virtuoso in that. But I was so the the coolness and spotlight of being a guitar player was, you know, shined a little bit brighter. So yeah, it
Okay.
was always about being that first. I was really more interested in being, in a band or performer, that kind of thing.
How old were you when you started like purchasing your own like records that you were like interested enough to like seek out music?
Man, I got it like young. Probably even, I remember going before we even moved to the West Coast to the Seattle area. I remember in Brooklyn we lived close to a record store, and I remember me and my friend would go get 45s, like Captain and Tennille and Elton John and things like that. I was into it really early. Um, and yeah, then guitar lessons when I moved out to Seattle. My first job was at 15 and a half, because that's the legal working at one day a week at a record store. And then I ended up managing that record store. I ended up working there through my all high school and
Oh
right
wow.
out of high school. So yeah, just man, it's really just been my whole life kind of. I mean, little other interests there here and there, but it always kind of circled around to music in some form. And so yeah, it's funny how the record store and records have just always been part of it.
Mhm.
Such an early.
I love how that
Anyway,
culture is back because
it's really
you know,
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I
So
feel like
part
we
of it,
lost.
I was a record buyer I became a record buyer for the record store for like imports and all the cool stuff. So, it's just funny that now that's coming back. I was like, you know, I have this funny thing where I remember, so I was on a vinyl actually quite early because my first band was on Metal Blade Records and on a couple of compilations. And I remember by the time CDs came out, that had passed, my dream was get on a CD. Everybody's dream was to get on a record,
That
or
makes
that just
sense,
really
though.
shows my age as well. But nonetheless,
No, dude, that makes sense. I feel like, that was like a crazy new technology. I remember that. I mean, I'm 45, so I mean, I remember being like seeing the transition from vinyl to tapes, then tapes to CDs kind of thing.
right?
Um, and I like the I don't know, there's something about the vinyl experience. Like we just went to Asheville about 3 weeks ago, in North Carolina, and they have a couple really great vinyl shops. And there's something meditative about going into a vinyl store and just looking through the used
Oh,
section, you
like I
know?
said, I grew up going to them, worked at them, and then for me, just I mean, the classic experiences of looking at my records and dreaming, reading the back of the Boston album and tracing the front cover and Judas Priest albums it, and then just collecting every import. And even as I got more and more into metal and punk rock and thrash and collecting all this, I mean, it was just, you lived for it. So that was definitely a big part of my, you know, drive to be into, to make it as it were, to get a band that could put something out, and which also brought me to recording studios so early because you know I I was in recordings trying to get my bands recorded way too soon. Like I had no business being in a recording studio yet, but I knew I was really ambitious and I thought I got to get into the studio if I'm going to be on a record. That's even before I want playing live too, but I knew that that was like something I had to do. I got to get something recorded.
Yeah. Was that first band, was that the band Mace that I've read about? You were
Yeah,
like
yeah.
17 years old when you guys put that record
Yeah,
out?
well, I start. You know how when you're that young, you get a name, and then it kind of just sticks with you through different lineups. Because then you think, well, we can't change it now. Everybody knows us, which is like 10 people. But yeah, that was like my 15-year-old concept drawing stage plots on my peachy, my folder and stuff. But basically the first lineup. I started just saving money and going into local studios. Like I said, we had no business. We didn't know anything. Um, we didn't even do good covers. And uh, but I do that, and God, one of the first couple things recorded, I sent off. I just like because I was looking at records all the time, and I just was bold and naive, and I just started sending stuff to labels. I'd copy the address, off the back. And when we started getting into that more, heavy metal thrash stuff, there was opportunity because of the compilations that started coming out. So I sent to them, and at the same time we were accepted to Metal Massacre 5, which was that compilation series that broke a lot of bands like Slayer and Metallica and Voivod and Metal Church, on and on and on. There's like 10 of those compilations. So a lot of bands came out of that, some nowhere, but quite a few that actually ended up having, careers. We got accepted to that. And at the same time, we also got accepted to one that was very big in the Northwest called Northwest Metal Fest. And so we were on two at the same time, one out of state, worldwide, and one locally, that made us really big in our area. So we just were like off and running really fast.
Man, man.
And then we all of a sudden were like opening for Slayer on their very first shows, Show No Mercy tour. And I was working at the record store where I was getting those records coming in, and I'm like, I'm playing with it. I mean, it was really intoxicating, and it was all kind of happening. Um, so yeah, so it was kind of boom, like, and we were amateurs. Like we did not know what we were doing. We were not really good enough, but we were terrible, really. But we were so enthusiastic and
Yeah.
energetic about it that it kind of an attitude that our it overshadowed all our crappiness for the most part.
Man, it's like bringing that East Coast energy to the laid back West Coast kind of thing.
Kinda, I yeah, I mean, I have very, very Brooklyn family, can and a lot of nerve and attitude and things like that, and especially, as a suburb of Seattle. Seattle was nowhere then, and the suburb I was in is even less, so, yeah, it was kind of, uh yeah, like, n it was pretty bold of me to do, um, but somehow timing-wise was kind of incredible. It just happened to because of that underground movement with fanzines and things like that, and the punk rock element of it, and the DIY-ness of it all, and somehow Seattle, even through the slower times there was, you know I took it for granted, but there's recording studios everywhere. There's always been and places to play. I mean, we would do our own shows. We were so young, we'd have to do our own shows. We'd have to rent, uh,
Like a teen
VFW
center.
hall. Yeah, anything like that. Like, all any kind of we became experts at it. We'd find these places, we rent them, we'd hire our own. We got smart, and you could hire an off-duty cop and pay by the hour, which seemed expensive, but you pay them by the hour, but it would assure that no cops would show up and bust it because you had an off-duty cop there.
That's so great.
So and we'd sell our own T-shirts. Our bass player was a great artist, so he got a job at a screen printing place, and then there we had our merch going, and we're just very savvy that way, and and then that led to European deals, and we started charting in Kerrang and Burn magazine in Japan, with these horrible recordings, which then later made me realize, oh, I wasn't really interested in being an engineer or anything, but at all. I was all about I wanted to be a rock star, I wanted to be a guitar player. Um, but once I started realizing, and once I started like, because I was very much into, uh, being successful and being melodic and things like that. But that brief period there, I was into thrash and punk rock, and you kind of get away with it. And then
Mhm.
once I started realizing, well, I want to go further, I want to be more successful, and I realized, oh, I need better recordings, and I have to start really thinking about writing a song instead of soloing over top of the guitar player or over the singer.
So, it was,
I
like, out
started
of
getting smart about it.
yes, but does that mean it was out of necessity that you felt like you needed to learn that stuff?
Well, it's even funnier than that because I didn't think it was something that I was not like innate to or capable. It wasn't really my thing. I didn't have any desires that way. Um, so, but as I started trying to get better at things, and I met um, a guy that I worked with named Ron Holt, who actually was an early guy with some of the Alice in Chains stuff, very early days hidden scene stuff. He was like a songwriter for real and a musician, and he had a 4-track, and I'd already been in studios and stuff. But I started seeing what he could do at home on his 4-track, and I was kind of going, maybe I should be doing more of this before going into the studios with these older guys. They seem like to me at the time, and like maybe if I do it, I understand more what So I started doing that and started getting programming drum machines, and I very early on got into samplers and things, even though they had nothing to do with my music. I started getting a little bit of a bug for the tech a little bit,
Ah.
but only really for my own purposes. I had no intention of wanting to record anybody else.
So then When
And
did
the
the
more
ti
just so I could be more savvy in the studio when I was with a real engineer.
Right. But when did the tide turn where you were like, "I kinda like this?"
Well, gear, in general,
Amen, brother.
right?
Amen.
And guitar wise, I was just going crazy in guitar gear and pedals, and that was because I pedals was an easier way to show off and cover my less practice because I became known for my sounds and pedals and more shtick than substance sometimes in my career, and just because of laziness. I was kind of a shredder, but I was sloppy and lazy. Like it was weird. I should have been more disciplined. But I was kind of driven for the spotlight kind of stuff more. But as time grew on, and then there's this period in Seattle where then I started after the Mace thing. I started trying to find a new sound. I was getting influenced by a lot of things from England. I jumped around, from goth stuff to all the way to Britpop to what, or the in this before Britpop, like The Cure and anything coming from England. Um, Trying to find sounds. I was in all kinds of different, like everybody was at that time period before, late 80s, before 89, 90. Everybody was trying to find their sound, including bands like Alice and guys from Pearl Jam, whether they were in Green River or anything before that. There was this period there where there was such an influence coming from LA, um, and the metal scene and all of us, even Stone and Mike, we've all talked about how, Maiden and everything, that's where we all came from, and just, all that stuff. And um in Seattle, there's like, on the east side of Seattle, where a lot of the metal bands came from, like Queensryche and stuff. There was all these battles of the bands. It was really metal based or punk rock. And so when they started fusion, where I was with thrash and like a punk band called The Accused, who were crossing into metal, that was everybody was kind of throwing everything at the wall, including glam and everything in between, and me included. I tried it all. We all did, and there just happened to be a lot of people in that scene that were ambitious in music. So like I said, it was just crazy timing. But when I really, so I started, really wanting to go major label stuff, and everybody else did too. And I got to say, a real big turning point was when I heard the first Love Bone demos and Alice demos that came out of London Bridge, which I didn't work at, or one of the only things I hadn't even recorded it yet, and I'd been to almost all of them, and they were still new. But when I heard that, I went, Wait a minute, this is a new level. Like everybody just kicked it up a notch. Why these sound like records almost, and they're songs and they're good." And that's when that kind of kicked in, and then I went and got studio time myself at London Bridge. Um, and I'd actually even been out there. They had kind of this promotional thing because they were new, with Queensryche doing an autograph party there, because Queensryche had kind of hit it pretty big for a Seattle thing. So I saw it and I go, wow, this place is for real, you know. Um, and like I said, then I heard the demos and I knew, okay, something's going on here. And I had a band of, I was still searching, like I said, trying to find a sound, but I booked some time there. And that ultimately that opened the whole door
Okay.
to everything else. Not exactly the way I wanted it to, but it was calculated to some degree.
Well, let me ask you this, because since that period of time left and still to this day leaves quite a fingerprint on the music industry itself, did you notice? I mean, I know you said like everybody was trying to find their sound, and I find that so interesting. Oh no, I think his camera went out. He kind of predicted this. I'm gonna wait till this comes back, but he said his camera was acting funky. So I think he's got to pop a new battery in there. But in the meantime, I will filibuster. So I was going to ask him about the Seattle scene and what he noticed about it in that moment. in terms of predictive, qualities of the scene and all that. So we're going to get into that. And I got to take him on a little journey here through some PJ and some blind Melon. So we'll see what happens. I got to get him back on here. He said that he fired up all his stuff and his battery went. So he was like, I don't know what's going on with my camera, but I think we're going to be okay. But you know what? It happens, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody got any questions they want to pop into the chat? Feel free to do that too. And I'll see if we get some time we can get in there. We have a whole list of questions here, ladies and gentlemen. A whole list. And hopefully we'll get to most of it. We'll see here. But very, very interesting. I think we're about to hit a stride here. Some serious stuff. Okay, here it comes. Hey, man.
Hey, will this work?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sorry, I had to switch to the phone.
That's totally fine. Where do you want to get comfortable somewhere?
Is this working out for you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it should be fine. You want to prop it up somewhere where you can relax?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, I just went back to see. I am so sorry about that.
Dude, don't worry about it. No big deal. I'll just filibuster a little bit. I was going to ask you, so, I was saying, since that scene had such a fingerprint, and like a marker in the history of American music, like, did you notice anything that was like predictive about the scene in terms of like how you saw things evolving at the time? Like, because there's so much different music. There's so much different music between Alice, between Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, like everything that happened. I feel like Nirvana, like so many different styles of music, I think were happening. But did you notice that? And were you like, oh, this is going to be big?
I did, but I didn't see it that way. It was because, what was really happening was the sub pop stuff.
Right.
That's what I saw. So, and Alice was like, they were kind of metal and they were not part of sub pop. And I remember that being quite a thing at the time because the local press and stuff was kind of confused by that too. Like until it got big and it was the word, it was actually, England, the NME and Melody Maker that coined grunge kind of for the sub pop bands.
Mm-hmm.
It really didn't have that whole full umbrella until like Alice and Pearl Jam kind of hit. So like locally, we weren't calling it. I don't know. It wasn't. You couldn't really. That early on, you couldn't predict it yet. So you couldn't you couldn't really jump on a bandwagon per se. You were either part of that sub pop movement, or it just so happened, let's face it, it was a lot of Susan Silver and Kelly Curtis management had kind of all those bands. So
Mm-hmm.
once those kind of hit, that was kind of that gateway. Of course, after those, especially after the Alice stuff really hit, that's when what you hear about people moving to Seattle or trying to make, when all the copycat type bands kind of came. But it was already too late, really, by that point. And from my view, I hear different versions of it, how people have talked about it, but that's how I saw it. But for me, at that point, I was already in the studio making records. I wasn't even in a band at that. I kind of missed that
Right.
thing.
It seems like the scene was pretty electric though. Like it
was on fire for sure.
Yeah.
But like but even before that, like, even 88, 89, there was really, the place was on fire. It hadn't solidified yet. And there was tons of different styles and, it was still the different blending of the punk rock and metal camps. And there's a lot of searching, but there were shows and there was touring acts coming through. And, it was that era too of a lot of, indie labels. So you had all these bands coming through, like whether it was, punk rock bands like Husker Du, Black Flag, and all those scenes, or the just that whole indie movement thing was big, and college radio, and um,
Hmm.
you know, there was definitely a thriving music scene already. It just wasn't, people weren't getting major label deals yet, but
Yeah.
nobody was really looking for them because it wasn't even, that's not what anybody was doing it for. You know, it was such a indie music town.
Right. Like, who the hell thinks that's going to happen in Seattle, of all places,
Right.
at that
Or,
time? Yeah.
and even just in general, like people weren't, I mean, being a rock star was, you know, if people knew you around town and you had a good turnout at the club, you know what I mean? It
Hmm.
wasn't, you know, um, yeah, there were, you know, of course, there's always, you know, the glam type bands or that kind of, you know, that wanted to start them. But I mean, it people were doing it earnestly. Of course, there was dreams of making it, but you know,
Yeah.
they
I
were
mean,
doing it for the love of it, as you know, and all that.
and it's crazy to like hear Jeff Ament talk about like when they lost Andy and like he was like, I guess I gotta move back to Montana. Like this isn't gonna happen. I've tried so hard my whole life
Yeah,
to do this. And then something like PJ happens and it's like, oh, maybe we got another chance. This is a second win kind of thing.
I
And
I thought the same thing while we were doing the demos, and when we were doing the records with Eddie, when we were doing vocals. I was thinking, I literally remember myself saying, because I'd be in the studio by myself with them all through the night, because you know Rick, the producer, would go home sometimes. All right, just keep tracking, and we'll listen to stuff in the morning. And I remember thinking, like, saying to myself, going, you know, well, at least they had Love Bone.
right.
Like I remember saying that, like I was like kind of saying, you know, I feel, you know, it was pretty cool that they got lucky enough to get a deal and record a record and have Love Bone. I Because I, not that I felt sorry for them, I was just feeling like, you know, this will do whatever, but yeah, it's cool. At least that was, you know, they were a big band, because it seemed like they were a big band if you were in Seattle, even though
Right.
nobody knew they were. So like I was already counting them out. I was like, and not because I didn't think they were good or anything. I just thought, well, that's just how the cookie crumbled, you know?
Right. Do you remember, like, in terms of, I've always been curious about this because everybody knows about the even flow story of doing like 100 takes of that because they were like Stone was so, it's not the right tempo, it's not the right tempo, like kind of thing. But I'm more curious about, and you probably have some stories you could tell me right now about the
Well,
session.
that one in particular is this. I'm glad that they told that story because it verified my telling of it. Because I had done an interview for Mix Magazine that I was very excited to be do, and I had told that story, and I'd never told it before. I don't know if you've heard my version of that.
I haven't yet. I
But,
need to check it out though.
well, in a quick nutshell of it, it's so when they were doing that, so it was going on and on and on, and it's like 2 in the morning, and we've just been going through reel after reel. One thing to this day, I've never worked on a project that used more tape in my
Then
life
10.
than 10. Like there's never been, like their tape budget had to be their most expensive thing. We used so many reels of tape because they were so adamant about doing it live, so we'd have to, you know, just I was changing reels all the time,
Yeah.
which was another problem of trying to keep track of that, all of that. But on that particular thing, on that take, not knowing it was going to be that take, they I'm sitting there and they're running through it, and I hear this noise. It goes like, it's something like, which is the tape running off the reels. I ran out of, I misjudged how much tape was on there. But I'm thinking, oh no. And I'm thinking, oh man, they're just gonna do it again all night. It's just been one more time, one more time.
Right.
And so, you know, I kind of not worried too much about it. And then they end, and I hear this, that's it. That's the one. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And
Uh,
so I'm like, now I'm panicking. I'm getting all flustered. And yeah, I had to. So they're like, hey, let's come in and listen to it. And I'm like, I'm on the talk back, and I go, can you guys just go in the lounge and let me pull a mix up real quick. Just give me a minute. And I have a window that I can look out into the lounge, and they're out there looking at me like all anxious to come in. And I panic. And so so I had stars next to takes that, I thought we should listen to. I just grabbed one real quick and chopped the end off of one and edited it on, tape spliced it, and then called them in, and then made sure I stood over by the tape machine, because when the edit goes by, you can either see it or you can hear the little go by from the tape on the edit. And so I'm playing it loud and standing in front of the tape machine and just hoping it's gonna freaking work, and that it's gonna seamlessly go into an ending that they don't really notice wasn't that ending.
Right.
And it did, and I didn't say anything about it. And then I'm debating whether to tell Rick, and I'm like, hey, I'm just not going to say anything. And so time goes by, and a week later or whatever, when we're going through all it takes to start really making sure we got the right ones and the overdubs and all that, it was just me and Rick listening down, and he's like, oh, there's an edit on that. I go, yeah. We did an edit. He goes, yeah, there was an edit on that one. He goes, oh, okay, all right. And I never talked about it for years. Because why? I didn't really. And then it was funny because who knew that was gonna be a single or who knew anything of it? And so I had finally shared that news in the Mix magazine. They wanted me to talk about it live, and I said, well, I don't really have anything exciting to tell you, but there is one funny story. And I told them that. And she said, let me talk to the editor, because I think they're going to want to go with that one. And so, but yeah, so I generally remember that because of that happening. And so when I saw there was something Mike talked about it, and then later they talked with on Rick Beato and things like that. So I was like, okay, verifies my story to some degree.
It's so funny. Was there any other tunes on there that were tricky? Because I feel like Garden, that middle section is pretty tricky, like with the timing, with when Dave does his specific fills and stuff. By the way, Dave Grusin, he has the best swing feel. Like, as far as all the drummers that have been part of Pearl Jam, when I saw him play with them, when he played with them, when they did all of 10, when Matt was sick, and then when he played on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I forgot how hard that dude can swing, because a lot of that music swings pretty hard. And no one has that feel like him.
So I'm so glad you say that, because I'm always saying that about Dave. So much so that we've actually stayed friends for now. I just spoke with him like a month or so ago, and we're online. I always talk to him online, and I hired him for different projects I've done throughout the decades, in LA and Seattle and all over. I'll get, if there's a budget and there's a drummer that needed, I'm always calling Dave. And I've always, everybody talks about the other drummers, and I always go, man, my favorite drummer, not just because I worked on that record, but I always thought Cruisin' had the best feel.
He does.
Yeah. And like I said, I've done other records with him and projects, and it's the same. It's like, I just know he's going to have that feel. And he's helped me out. There was a band I was producing, and we were getting them a deal, and their drummer quit, and we had A&R people coming to a show, and I called him, and I go, dude, can you? And he goes, oh, sure. When is it? I go, tomorrow night. And he's like, I can't learn to say, oh, please. And he showed up and did it in the Viper Room in LA. He's been I've just been a huge fan of his drumming. I always think he's really underrated.
100%, dude. Yeah. Everybody always talks about Aberzees, and I'm like Dave A's, he's great too in his own right.
I recorded him once.
But that first record and that feel, and when you see Dave, if you go find, I can't remember what show that was, what city they were in when Dave showed up and played all 10 with them. But God damn it, he sounded so fucking good, man.
I think, some of the things that people don't realize, I think his drumming, his swing, his feel on that, and Tim Palmer's mixes are outside of, what the band did in the studio, writing and recording the songs, is what really made that a hit record as a whole.
Do you remember what Mike and Stone were playing through when they recorded? Like, was Mike?
Yeah, it's pretty. Everything we did with them, even on both the two, we did 2 month-long demos and the record, and even the Temple stuff. It was all basic stuff. It was like, and I know they got more things when they signed with Epic, and that was actually coming through. So basically, it was. I know we used Mike's Marshall. He had a red Marshall head. My Marshall head was there, and he bought a '59 Bassman, and it was just basic good things, Same, and then Stone always had a Marshall and a Twin, and then they just bought a cut. They didn't even like really splurge. They thought they were splurging, but in comparison to things I'd seen later with other people getting record deals, it was nothing. Like I think Stone bought a Gretsch guitar, and I think he bought a oh, what is it? I'm blanking. The amp that Page used to use in the studio.
Oh, Supro?
A Supro. Got a Supro, and pretty much, not much more than that. Just those kind of classic things with classic miking, 57 or 421, just real. And that's how the Temple of Dog record was. Everything's just basic meat and potatoes kind of stuff, the classic stuff you would have. There's no like real frills or fancy stuff.
Did Mike play his Strat the whole way, or did he ever pick up a Les Paul?
I think it was mostly the Strats. That's hard to pull back. He had that black Strat. Oh God, that's hard to remember.
He's my man. Like forever, he'll be my man.
But yeah, mostly the Strat is what comes to mind. I'm sure we use some stuff in overdubs, but generally speaking, that Stone and his Les Paul. I mean, ever since I saw those guys, like I used to have a rehearsal room with Mike, so I mean the red Marshall sitting there all the time. I'd see it. It's so funny because that's that same amp and my amp, which is funny because that was on there. And then with Stone, I'd see him play live so much from back in Green River days and everything. He always had a Twin and a Marshall, which influenced me to get a Twin and a Marshall because I saw it worked for him. And but yeah, it was just a lot different than like Alice stuff where there was Mesa Boogies and Marshalls, tons of layer. Like it was with those guys, it was very classic stuff.
Let's jump to Alice because when I think about like Facelift versus Dirt, for instance, like there's something for me as a listener, there's something about Alice in Chains records that always feels like, even if you're listening through a laptop, it could be like the worst speaker setup. It feels like you're just surrounded, encompassed by the music, the way that they record their records and the way that, even the like snare drum, like the snare on Angry Chair, like that snare is so detuned. It's so loose and so fat. And I feel like that drum sound just kind of wraps around you. So like the arc of how those records, and I don't even think they're from Facelift to Dirt is that drastically different in terms of the sonics of it. But what is it about their records that feels that way, that makes the listener kind of wrapped up?
Well, okay. Well, once again, when you're talking about drums, Sean Kenny's another one with a really particular feel and delivery. Even when you just watch how his body moves when he plays, so there's that. And then, there's definitely Dave Jordan's production is he's a totally different animal. How he approaches the records. I mean, I remember, just when I first heard Nothing Shocking, what he did on the Jane's Addiction stuff. So, I mean, he kind of did the same kind of magic with Alice, especially going into Dirt, because I don't know how familiar you are with this, but we recorded Dirt, me and Rick at London Bridge, their first shot at doing that record, which they don't talk about much, but we recorded that whole record. It got scrapped. So we kind of referred to it as the demos, but they were going for a record.
Dang.
And a lot of it was label stuff, I think they were Rick wasn't really that proven of a producer yet. Jordan was. They had success with Facelift. Alice was really the first band to really jump into a big arena like that. And it was safer, to go with Jordan. When Jordan came in, Rick, as he does, and as you know from his other productions, is more song oriented and more classic sounding stuff. Where Jordan came in and had more of a concept, and the big thing he did, which was incredibly noticeable, and I think was what turned Alice into the Alice everybody thinks of, is that he slowed all the tempos down.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And even from earlier Alice, like on their demos, it was upbeat rock and roll, metal influenced, and it went slower and heavier and detuned, and that gave that,
Sludgy.
yeah, what they're
Was that
really known
so?
for.
Was Them Bones much faster than that before?
Yeah, everything was just, not like mass. Everything was just delivered much more up and, you know, rock and roll, just more upbeat ish,
Huh.
as opposed to, slowing it down and really making it grind. It didn't like grind. It like,
Yeah.
you
That's
know,
a great adjective for their music, dude. Like, I feel like, you know what always cracks me up about
and
Dirt?
I've heard
Yeah.
Jordan talk about that, and it was very conceptual. He purposely did that and told them, this is what we need to do. We need to make it sound like. Oh, I remember in an interview I saw him talking about. He wanted to make it sound like a machine, like
Mm,
machinery, and more than their uh, innate. Let's play it and rock it and make it hard. Rock it.
yeah.
Instead of trying to get that point across, doing it that way, he made it come across. Put the point across in a more heavier, slowed down, grinding way, which
Yeah.
is genius.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that it defines them now. Like what you said.
Not that I got at the same time. I remember doing that record in particular, and like really when we were doing, I was like, "Oh, this is really good. I like this." Where when we were doing Pearl Jam, I was like, "I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is gonna do."
Well, you came from that thrashy world, so that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty open to anything though. My taste was pretty wide, but uh, no, they. I just it. I guess what the difference was with Pearl Jam stuff, I didn't understand. To me, when we were doing it, it sounded like they were playing, and because they were really, Eddie was really showing love for the Who and all. Everything sounded like bad, and they would do like Bad Company covers in between, like warming up or getting sounds, and so it was like this classic rock thing. I'm like, what is they're playing like, you
Yeah.
know,
It's
uh,
interesting because that band, out of all the bands, and I love Soundgarden, I love Alice in Chains, I love Mother Love Bone, I love all that stuff. Um, Out of all the bands, for some reason, Pearl Jam spoke to me because of the melodies involved. It felt like the Beatles were if the Beatles were a rock band or something, like a heavier rock band is what it felt like to me when I heard
yeah.
it.
Well,
There was a sophistication, I guess, to it,
well,
you know?
there's some real actual songwriting going. Stone and Jeff were very adamant about writing songs. They knew the importance of that by that point, especially after already having a deal and going. They had some experiences that by that point of making records.
Yeah.
And then stumbling across somebody like Eddie Vedder who unleashed all this emotion and lyrically and everything else. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
his
just
melodies are genius if you really
kind of
think.
lightning in a bottle kind of thing.
Yeah. What I was gonna say though about Dirt, just real quick, because it cracks me up every time I listen to that record, is if you listen to Down in a Hole and you're taking that whole journey through that song, which is a beautiful song, and at the end it's just like growly and snarly, and then it resolves in a major key at the end. That shit cracks me up every time I hear it because it feels like the most nerdy, like, here you go, I'm gonna resolve this,
Yeah,
you
see,
know?
this is it. If you knew and saw like their earlier days and how Jerry and them would write, it's not surprising to me. It's kind of like a tag back to some of that stuff that was embedded in them. I
I
think by the
heard they had
time,
great senses of humor. Like, I heard Lane was a super funny, like, very
yeah,
joyful person.
yeah, they're and same with Sean. I mean, they're just and Mike, they're just like total cut ups and clowns, class clowny kind of stuff, you know.
Nice. That's amazing. So tell me a little bit about your relationship with Melon, because Blind Melon is another one of my favorites. I mean, there's Soup right there. Um, I love that band, and the veracity at which Shannon, came out of a cannon with his voice the first time I heard
Right.
him sing. I was like, "Holy crap, who is this?" So, like, what's your relationship to Melon? I
Well,
didn't even know that.
well, I didn't. So because I was part of the studio at the time, and uh, like I mentioned, well, eventually I ended up getting my own record deal again in a band. So I had this kind of hiatus, or I was kind of working the studio, but also developing this or my stuff. But I was at the studio all the time. So John Plum, who's now one of the owners of London Bridge, had just started, and he started working on that record. But I was there all the time and helping and still working for the studio. And so I ended up just getting to know them and helping them with. We would rent a house to the bands that would come out in the studio. So I was helping maintaining that, and we just became friends. So while they're making the record, I'm hanging with them, and I like me and Brad kind of discovered Loveless by My Bloody Valentine that had come out, and we were bonding on that. We ended up doing a lot of work together. Shannon ended up singing on some stuff I had in the upstairs demo room. Uh, and then they moved, they ended up living in Seattle for a while. I just kind of became part of their scene. I helped Brad with his solo record. And then even later on in LA, when Brad and Christopher opened the studio, I ended up moving to Los Angeles, and I did all my work out of their place. So we became part of, you know, I was
Yeah,
just kind of there. I just didn't actually work on their record, but I was
right.
there the whole time. So
But I mean, I feel like Christopher Thorne is a genius writer. I feel like, and that I feel like,
they're all amazing players in both
yeah,
those
yeah,
bands. So,
totally. Like between those two guitar parts, like they're one of my favorite two guitar bands because
oh yeah,
talk about the dichotomy of this guitar versus this guitar coming out of this speaker, coming out of this speaker, and how well those parts complement each other.
right. And they were so, so I got to watch the making of it basically. So what was interesting with them too is how they wanted the exact opposite of anything of any way they did Pearl Jam or anything. So they didn't. The studio is known for the big live room. That pretty much makes the sound of some of those records, and they want nothing to do with that. So they recorded the drums in the guitar booth. It was a large guitar booth. I shouldn't say guitar overdub room. It was quite large, probably as large as some studio's main room, but it was carpeted in, a dead type of room. And it was kind of like crazy to do the drums in there because it was just so like, it'd be like recording at some other famous studios like Sound City or Abbey Road and not using the main room. It was just
Right.
weird.
It's like a big,
Yeah, it was just weird. And but that's what they were like. They wanted that deader set, different sound completely. Uh, and funny from then on out, you see how many people all of a sudden wanted to record in their drums in that room. But yeah, so they, you know, all really musical, really smart players, songwriters again. And that's when Rick could act. People were, look, he was up for bigger acts, and when he heard them, he heard that songwriting ability
mhm.
and was actually worked for that record. He went out and met them in North Carolina where they were at the time rehearsing, and I hadn't seen him actually go after a band like that. So he definitely heard their talents.
That's
And then, like
amazing.
I said, I was just lucky to be able to. I wish I would have worked on the record now, but I was lucky enough to end up becoming close enough with them that I got to do all kinds of stuff with them
Did
afterwards.
did you see them like doing the similar thing, like using old amps, like small 8-inch speaker type
They
vibes,
were
and
they
like
were yeah, they were more savvy that way because they recorded all their own demos. And as I said, Brad and Christopher ended up owning an incredible studio, and they bought beautiful ABI console right away. They were they were already on that track, to produce and become their own engineers and producers. I think that they engineered and recorded all their demo. Like they were already savvy in that respect. Um, but yeah, so they were probably more experimental in that regard of tones. But I gotta say, even them though, anything Rick did, there was not a lot of studio trickery, as it were. He was pretty, classic with getting. He wanted just good, clean tones, straight,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
which
those
was
drum
like
tones.
great for me. It was a great lesson for me having to, as an engineer, because he'd throw me in the fire, and you, it was always scary working for him. So you were under the gun, and you had to do good. He was all business, and you had to be on it,
Yeah.
getting
And
those
you were at
sounds.
London Bridge for like a decade, right? Or a little bit more than that?
Yeah, well, so yeah, like 89, the end of 89 going into 90. And then I've just kind of always been there in one way or the other. But like
Right.
working there, it was like till 94 when my band record, we ended up going to the studio and we're doing our record there for Island Records. So that was out for a few years trying to make that happen. And then I kind of came back and then
Right.
I went freelance, but I always would bring projects there.
Hmm.
Always had my foot in there since I first started working there
Yeah.
until the brothers sold it. But even then I still went back and, here and there.
Kind of like a home away from home in a way.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean,
hmm.
it's still to this day the best sounding studio I've worked out of, and been lucky enough to work, everywhere in LA, Electric Lady in New York, EMI in London. I've worked all over Detroit, everywhere, and
You got
that
any cool Electric Ladyland memories?
yeah, I did. I was doing stuff with Greg Dooley from the Afghan Wigs there, and I did a Dennis Leary comic record.
I saw that in your discography. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
there. Well, because he's really good friends with Greg Dooley from the Afghan Wigs, and I was doing stuff with them, and Greg was helped produce that record. So yeah, it was just cool working there. It was cool. D'Angelo was in Studio A, and we'd like sneak into his studio when he wasn't there and like check out all his gear and do things we weren't supposed to be doing. Meeting tons of cool people. I had a great story where Eddie Kramer was in Studio B while I was there, and nobody would show up till late, so I'd be just sitting there waiting. And Eddie Kramer came in, and he's like, "Hey, I heard you're in Studio C," and I know who he is. He doesn't know who I am. I know who he is, and I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, what do you doing anything?" And I'm just waiting for the people to show up. He goes, "You want to come in and hear what I'm doing?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And so I follow him in the studio, and he starts playing me Hendrix. He was doing remastering of and mixes for Hendrix reissue. So I'm sitting in Electric Ladyland, Hendrix's studio, watching Eddie Kramer pull up faders of tracks of Jimi Hendrix in Jimi Hendrix's studio, and hearing like Jimmy talk in between songs and
Oh my
stuff.
God, dude.
Yeah,
That is crazy.
yeah, and I was just staring at the back of Eddie's head while he's doing this, and I'm just going, "This is amazing." So, cool stuff like that. It was cool to be able to be there, and I was hang. I'd have the day free because Greg wouldn't even come into work like 11 o'clock at night. He would only work at night, like through the night, and so I'd have the day. I'd never slept, and I'd just sit there and hang out in the office and hear stories from everybody. It was like fantastic.
Man. Dude, I just heard this really, I'm pretty sure it was Dennis Leary that was talking about this, but I just heard this story about him and Michael Stipe. Do you know about that story?
Yeah, I think I did. I think I saw the story.
When he was talking about how, like, you remember how he would do those spots on MTV, like trashing
Oh
stuff?
yeah, I mean, believe me, I
Yeah.
sat with him while he was doing things like that,
Oh God. And then he's
next to me at the board. Like all my doing those sessions, and my face would hurt so much from laughing and smiling because the whole hour after hours it was him, and he'd invite all his comic friends over, and they would just all be like riffing, and it was just yeah,
Yeah.
and like at the time it was when Fiona Apple was blowing up, and she had just won some award, MTV award or something, and she had said something funny, and he just would not let up about making fun of Fiona Apple. He ended up like taking her quote and framing it and sending us all framed pictures of her quote. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he'd always be anything like that. Like remember the Michael Stipe, Fiona Apple, anybody who's always like taking hits on them, just cracking jokes and making fun of people.
My gosh. Well, I mean, we got to touch on this really quick because can we talk about the thing that you're working on right now a little bit, really quick,
Sure.
before we end this with Lane Staley stuff?
Oh yeah. So just yeah, we just did. So this was stuff that he did with a guy I mentioned earlier, Ron Holt, like I said, was kind of a inspiration to me to like really learn engineering and based off watching him write and record on 4 tracks. And he was friends with Lane too, and he got Lane singing and coming over and singing on all this music, and that's kind of where Lane, you know, was practicing his chops, his recording, hearing himself come back on tape. And me too. I'd go over there and we'd write together and do things. And I even sang some of the same songs Lane sang, believe it or not. And then I'm sure Alice fans know about the Music Bank because they released that Music Bank collection. So the rehearsal rooms where they started out, and my band Mesa, we talked about earlier, rehearsed there too. We'd come back from touring, and Lane was our door guy and opening our door for us. And I used to see him and Ron and Jerry, and Ron would be kind of their music coach mentor in a way, and kind of got them playing together. And pre-Alice, pre-Diamond Live, even like real old school Alice stuff, and kind of making them better players and stuff, and showing them. So he was kind of this unsung, unknown hero influence to the early music scene. And he was actually on one of those, his band, the Bonnage Boys, was actually on a compilation that I spoke of earlier, the Northwest Metal Fest thing. So he was, like I said, an unheard of influence in a lot of that music. So his brother, a musician as well, Ron passed away, but he went through all his tapes and all his things, and he was able to reconstruct a lot of stuff. And later, I shouldn't leave this out. So what makes it more interesting is years later, after Excessive Alice, Lane helped Jesse, his brother, and they went back into the studio, and Lane re-sang a lot of stuff.
Oh.
So yeah, so there's that. That's when Lane was pretty deep in his addiction, and he had problems with his teeth and things like that. So his singing was a little different, but we were able to put all these songs together, and it ended up having some people wanted to put it out, and it took a while because of getting rights and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to do it.
That's amazing. So when's that going to come to fruition, you think? Oh, can you hear me, Dave? Did I lose you?
Lost.
Can you see me moving? I can't. I think we might have a misconnection here. Hold on one sec. Let's see if you move around. Nothing, Dave? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Tommy, can you hear me? You got me, man? I think I'm all right. You got me?
Well, I lost you, so I'm not sure if I should hang up and try to reconnect.
Yes, try to do that. You got me?
Got you. Okay.
All right, all right.
I didn't know if I was still on or not, so I stopped.
That's okay. Yeah, when's that going to come out? Do we have a date?
I think what they're doing is they're gonna release a vinyl single for Record Store Day, this next coming one. So I think it's like the end of this year, February or something, or no, what would it be?
Like,
It's whatever the next record store. I have to find out for the label, but we just sent the mixes in.
oh
So
wow.
I don't know if they're like, we made the deadlines and everything, but they're gonna. I know that they're affiliated with the whole Record Store worldwide promotion stuff. This particular label, so they're really gonna try to market that and do special like vinyl only releases and lots of collectible kind of things like that. So
You think they'll do something super cool at Easy Street?
yeah, well, in particular there because the head of the label is really good friends with the owner of Easy Street. So and that's actually who introduced everybody. Is Matt from Easy Street. So there'll definitely be special things from regarding Easy Street.
Oh, that's awesome,
Yeah,
man.
so it's really interesting because just real quick, what I was going to say is that it's not Alice in Chains
Right.
like at all. And it shows, and you might have seen, fans will know this, but Lane had a big love for Prince and earlier glam stuff and things like that. And so this stuff, Ron Holt, the writer, very funk oriented
Oh
player
man.
and kind of pop writer. So it's nothing like you think, but yet it's still there's lots of dark overtones and stuff. It's very interesting. I think if you're thinking it's like the Lost Dirt tapes or something, it's not. But it's very interesting, and it's good for what it is. It'd be interesting to see how people take to it. But it's part of his history, and it's undeniably him singing.
Man, I'm all in. Dude, I felt like even though like Mad Season was kind of adjacent to Alice in Chains, it wasn't
Sure,
completely. I
yeah,
think it was different, you know?
but not. This is a further stretch
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
for any fans. But like in some ways, I was thinking this would probably hit a different generation. Like if they just didn't even say it was Lane, they put it out on TikTok videos and things. Like I think a whole other people would discover it and not even have a inclination that has anything to do with Alice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Dude, I can't wait to
But
hear it, man. It sounds
yeah,
awesome.
it's it. I get it because I know I'm worked with Ron so much and know his writing style and his humor and the stuff behind it. So I understand how other people will, and it's so dated. It's older stuff. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting, but it's one for the books. And it was
Man,
fun. It was crazy pulling up his tracks and hearing his voice, and on these songs that oh my god, I remember that in his mom's basement when he played me the tapes. So it was really a weird, surreal kind of working experience for me hearing that stuff.
like a bittersweet kind of vibe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just a trip, like it was, with a dog and going, "Arr!" It's like, oh wow,
Yeah.
or yeah. So
That's such a cool thing that that stuff still exists. Do you know what I mean?
it's,
Like,
I mean, if he should just get credit for the fact um, Jesse was able to salvage it and he re-recorded things. I mean, he did a lot of work to get it to where it is, and then he came out to me, and we worked in my studio and try to make it all have continuity and fit and sound recorded together, where it's really, which I think we did a good job in that because if you knew how pieced together it was, and now it sounds like it was all kind of done together. So anyway, we'll see
man,
how. It was an interesting project to be part of for sure. And another tag being, I felt honored to be another part of that legacy in Seattle and all that stuff.
heck yeah. Well, I mean, it's in the fabric of your DNA at this point, right? I mean, that has to be. I mean,
Yeah, and how many times, believe it or not, I've tried to shake that.
I'm
It's
sure, dude. But you know what, man? I will tell you this much. As a very big fan of that music changed my life. Like really, like you had a part in making me want to pick up a guitar, man.
Yeah, I
So
think I always have to remind myself that, and I've been lucky. I've gotten to do other things that blew up, and I've had my own record deals and things like that. But I would, that wasn't my thing necessarily, and I was kind of like, and like for a long time, I completely ignored it. I didn't even have it on my discography for some periods of time, and then it came, later on, and you say, "Wow, this really is a thing and it means to the people. And then I started thinking about how I felt about certain records. And so as I got older, more stopped trying to forge my own, I was not so self-absorbed about
You
my
could have
my
embraced
own
it, you
career.
know?
I embraced it all and like, yeah, okay, I
Well,
guess,
I'll tell you this, Dave. So my wife and I, on our 10-year anniversary, we went on a little trip. We left our daughter home with the grandparents. We went on a trip. We went to Canada and we went to Vancouver and we went to Seattle. And the Seattle part was I was like, "Oh, we have to go to Seattle if we're going to be out there." And when I got there, I've lived in Maryland my whole life. But when I landed there and I stepped onto the street, I felt like I was home because I felt like I had such a connection to the music. And I feel like the music is like so deeply embedded in my blood. I took my wife to Easy Street, and you know what's cool, dude, is that Mother Love Bone wall outside of Easy Street was gone. Jeff repainted it a week before we went. So
yeah. I memean, I remember hearing about all
I
that.
was like,
Yeah,
dang, this is like totally like cosmic, man. So
see,
like I took her there. I took her to the mural park where they did that concert. I took her, my wife doesn't care about any of this. She's like, oh God. She was like,
right.
humoring me, but like
Mine's the same way.
it was like a pilgrimage for me. It felt like it was connecting this part that's been inside of me my whole life, but I've never gotten to actually go to that city.
Right, and
Um,
I had to, as I was, so for me, I was always trying to escape that. See, like I wanted to
right.
go on to other things that I had, and so uh, you took it for granted and stuff, and it would seem so. I wanted to write, I wanted. It wasn't like that for us being there necessarily for me, but then, like I said, as I got older and I got to go to places and work in places I dreamt of, and meet some of the people that I dreamt of meeting, then I started having to realize, that's what this is for them. And it was just, I couldn't really grasp it because it was just too close to home.
Totally.
Um, and nobody was famous when we were doing it. It's like, I've had the experience later on where I'd work on records where, okay, they were already somebody and it's famous. And I get the idea, wow, we're recording. So when we were doing it, I was recording my friends and
Yeah.
my,
So
my
cool.
local, my local, uh, not competition, but friendly rivalries, in Mike or Stone
Hmm.
or or Jerry or any of them. We were all trying to get on the shows and make bands and find the right guitar player for a group, or you know what I mean, like
Hmm.
advertising. Like we were all doing that at the same time. So it was so close and like I said, it wasn't like Eddie Vedder walked in and he was a star. He wasn't
It was just Ed.
it was just this kid from San Diego. Like, how's he fit in? Who the hell is it? It was just so.
Let me ask
The
you one more
yeah,
question before we get out here, Dave, because I don't want to take up too much of
sure.
your time. Was Mike always somebody that people was looking up to? Like he was just like a phenom kind of early on with how he was playing because he was bringing in different vibes. He was bringing in the Hendrix and the Stevie
Well,
stuff,
no, see, that's what's funny because Mike was part of the uh,
glam shred.
well, yes, but he was on the east side. So there's like these two sides. The Seattle side across the water, the Lake Washington. You, there was that kind of area of town had more punk rock, more city, a little more grittier. Over the other side was the suburbs, so you had more metal, Kiss. There was Battle of the Bands at the roller rink where I would play. So it was kind of like what you were into, because suburbs were a little more, richer, middle class, upper middle class kids, and it was more metal kind of a thing. It was a little different than what Seattle was. And
Right.
he was part of that thing where everybody was coming out of Kiss and, like I say, the metal and Battle of Bands. And he was in a band called Shadow, and they were really young. They were known and kind of famous locally for being like the youngest band, younger
Mm.
than my band, which was young.
Right.
They were like almost a novelty. So in that way, he was known. And Stone and Jeff talk about it's like just from being when they were trying to venture into the Seattle area and the parties. You heard, they said they heard because the rehearsal rooms were over there. They heard, Mike playing over in the corner somewhere, and Tim DiGiulio and one of the local guitar players' guitars. and that's where they picked up. Oh, that kid can kind of shred,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And they were looking for a guitar player, but because there was a lot of shredders. There was guys from Queensryche. There was a band called Culprit. Those guys were amazing. We had this local guitar teacher named Rick Knotts, who I went to all. There's a lot of Kelly Gray. There's all these great guitar players in
Man.
Seattle. But Pearl Jam was not. They didn't want to be that metal, but they wanted a guy who could play,
Right.
but not like a shredder, not a
Right.
Yngwie or anything. So
Some
he
some
kind of
dude that
worked.
had some notes.
Yeah, so he just,
Right.
see, that band fell together like that. I mean, the whole thing is
It
great
sounds
because
like it.
I look back and I'm like, why didn't I? I could have just easily started playing with Stone and them,
Right.
What
Yeah.
I could have easily started a band with Lane. I'm like, how did I miss all that?
Well, man, you were destined to sit behind
Yeah,
a
I got in
console.
there. Yeah, I got in there somehow.
Man,
Not what I
that's so
thought,
cool.
but
Well, I don't know, man. I think it's pretty rad. It's pretty
yeah, it
awesome.
is. I'm very blessed to have been lucky to be around it all.
Yeah, and you're still doing it, so it's still cool,
Yeah, still yeah.
All right, Dave. So I do this thing at the end of my shows called the lightning round get down. I'm going to ask you 10 rapid fire questions.
Oh, I'm terrible at these. Okay.
Oh, it's fine. It's going to be so easy. These are layups. So I'm going to ask you 10 questions. It's a this or that thing. So you can just tell me which one of these. You can explain your answers if you want. You don't have to. But the first one's always the same. Lennon or McCartney?
Ooh, I kind of like McCartney.
Me too. I got you. I feel it. Jazz Master or Jaguar?
Jazzmaster.
412 cab or 212 cab?
Ooh, I could go either way. Depends what speaker's in it. I mean, I don't know. I could go either way.
Some creambacks?
Yeah, I mean, lots of choices there too. The greenbacks, the greenback. I mean, Alltech.
What's your favorite speaker in a cab?
Well, if I go back old school with my early influences like Randy Rhoads, I'd have to have an Alltech
Okay.
if I was going to be really like Randy. But whatever works, honestly. I mean, the best cab to me is a 412 with different speakers in it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Flying car or the ability to teleport?
Teleport.
Okay. Marshall or high watt?
Ooh. I'm going to have to say Marshall, but I've always wanted a high watt and never owned one.
All right. As a kid on the playground, are you on the swings or are you on the monkey bars?
Oh, that's tough. Probably monkey bars.
Okay. All right. You're on death row. You have a final meal. What is your final meal?
Oh, man. Oh, God, that's... Why am I choking on this one?
Sorry. Take your time.
Why am I choking on this one? I'm like, all this food's going through my brain. I don't know. Well, if I'm on death row, I guess a steak.
Nice
Just
steak.
the classic, yeah.
All right. Baked potato.
Yeah, I guess if I'm on death row, why not? I'd have to go classic.
Milkshake. Why not?
Yeah, just do all the bad stuff for you because you're gonna die.
Yeah, right. All right. Rack gear or plugins?
Oh, well, I gotta say nowadays, I'm pretty plug-in oriented.
They sound great, man.
Yeah.
Royer 121, overrated or accurately beloved?
Ooh, I have this weird relationship with Royers. I can throw one up and it's working, and then I could come back a half hour later and go, I hate that, and then change it out. And then sometimes I'll come in and somebody will have an engineer, a house guy will have a Royer on it. I'm like, oh, that sounds fantastic. What is that? A Royer. And I'm like, oh. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a classic for a reason, man. I guess.
I know. Yeah, they're just weird with me. They like hit and miss so much that they're not my go-tos, but if they work, they work, kind of thing,
Yeah. I feel like the Audio Technica 414 seems to be like that's the next best thing for people,
You know what's funny you say that is because on the IK Media amplitude. I don't use them too much in real life, but on the simulation, I'll use the 414.
Yeah.
But normally in real life, I like a classic, and we did on all those records with Rick, was a 57 and a Sennheiser 421.
Oh, okay. All
Those are
right.
what I like.
That's good to know. All right. Boss, Blues Driver, or Ibanez Tube Screamer?
Well, I'm not a big fan of either one of those, but I'd have to probably say that in that case, a Tube Screamer.
What's your favorite overdrive pedal?
Well, I'm a huge Big Muff fan, but way back
Oh,
from when. But I like, I like a ton of different ones and weird ones, and I
okay.
like to just go through them and switch them up and use whatever is there.
Are
Like
you
I don't
into
have,
like old school Proco Rats kind of thing?
I never liked Rack.
Me
They never.
either.
I hear them on other people. They work. They don't work for me. It's like a Fender Twins. I hear people can get dirty sounds on them out of them, and I'm like, I have no idea how you can do that. Love them for
Right.
clean. I could never use a Fender Twin for a dirty amp, but then I'll see certain people do it, and they sound fantastic.
Yeah,
So
that's a
I don't
biggie.
know.
Maybe they're popping out two of the power tubes and dropping down that wattage a little bit. I don't know. Pushing those.
I don't know. I've like I said, I stole it from Stony, but using the Marshall for dirty and the Fender for clean was always a thing back in the day.
That's awesome. All right, here's the last one, Dave. Sometimes it's the hardest, sometimes it's the easiest. If you could take one album and erase it from your memory, just so you can go back and experience it for the first time again,
Oh,
what album would that
wow.
be?
You know, just because we just mentioned it, maybe it's fresh in my mind, but that Nothing Shocking record was really a big deal for
Mm.
me then. Or if you go back a little bit further than that, when I Ride the Lightning was a big one that was
Oh,
kind of changed things. Then you go further back than that, Blizzard of Oz, the first Randy Rhoads record. Before that, Boston, I don't know. Key
those are all
moments.
good. Those are all good. And none of those have been mentioned in over 240 episodes. None of those have been mentioned, surprisingly.
Wow. Okay.
Can you guess probably the most popular answer for that? I bet you could.
No, what?
Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, yeah, I guess. Yeah. I got into that late. I had all these friends into it, and it was too mellow for me at that time. And then
Mm-hmm.
as I became more of a recording nerd, or more into it, I figured I got into it later.
Yeah. I mean,
There's a certain record, no matter how into everything you are, there's certain ones you miss. And then like, oh, I can't believe I wasn't into that before. But
dude, yeah, me too. I mean, there's still stuff that people want to have guests on. Like, I was just talking about Chuck Berry with Adam Levy a couple weeks back, and he was like, "Oh, dude, you got to go back and like check out some like really hip." Like, he had a bunch of really hip stuff that people don't like, the deep cut stuff.
yeah, I was
Um,
lucky. Like I said, I worked in record stores. So like usually the employees always had completely different taste. And so when it was there, like hour or two to put on the music, you'd get exposed to other stuff. So I was lucky in that sense. I got exposed to lots of different, styles and things that were popular that I wouldn't be into necessarily as a metal guy. I was like, the owner was into blues, and I was a guitar player, so I studied a lot of that stuff. So,
man,
but there's always still something like you didn't get into or missed.
yeah, yeah. Well, Dave, man, I don't want to take up more of your time, but this has been an absolute pleasure, and I super appreciate you for doing this.
Sorry about the camera.
Oh, don't worry about it, man. No problem at all. So if anybody wants to follow along with Dave's adventures, at Dave Hillis Music is a way to find that on Instagram. Do you use Facebook still, Dave, or is this?
I mainly use Instagram for music stuff, and then I do have davehillis.com is my website. It's just down. I'm relaunching it, revamping it.
Right.
But
Yep.
but basically, stick to the Dave Hillis Music or Google at it.
Yeah,
You'll
man.
find me.
Awesome. Yeah, sweet. So, Dave, you can hold on one second. Everybody else, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.